At no level of basketball could this ever be a technical foul, unless apparently A'Ja Wilson is involved. That's the controversy lighting up headlines after Indiana's stunning Game 1 victory. When Kelsey Mitchell drove hard to the basket, absorbed contact, and kept her composure, the last thing anyone expected was a whistle, not for the foul against her but for a technical on her. Yes, you heard that right. Mitchell was punished for daring to challenge Wilson in her own house on the very night Wilson was honored as league MVP. For Fever fans, it was proof of what they'd been saying all season. The officials are starstruck by Wilson, bending calls in her favor and tilting games under the guise of maintaining order. But here's where the story twists. That moment of injustice didn't break Indiana. It fueled them. Mitchell took the slight personally, drilling jumpers and threes with ice in her veins, almost as if to say, if you're going to penalize me for competing, then I'll make sure you regret it on the scoreboard. This wasn't just about one call. It became the symbol of the night. The referees may have given Vegas their whistles, but Indiana seized the narrative by refusing to be defined by them. The Fever showed that you can't intimidate, flop, or officiate your way to a win when grit and execution are louder than any referee's whistle. The Las Vegas Aces didn't step on the court to showcase the polished, high-level execution that made them back-to-back champions. No, the strategy was clear from the opening tip: bully ball. Elbows swung wide, bodies hit the floor, and whistles conveniently went silent whenever a Fever player was on the receiving end. To the casual fan, it might have looked like physical playoff basketball, but the replays told the real story. Vegas wasn't trying to outscore Indiana, they were trying to break them. Jackie Young set moving screens with linebacker hips, Chelsea Gray threw shoulders off ball, and A'Ja Wilson, instead of leaning on her MVP skill set, led the charge with forearms and theatrical flops that made even her own home crowd groan. But here's the shocking twist. What was meant to rattle Indiana only energized them. Every shove was answered with sharper ball movement. Every cheap foul was followed by quicker transition offense. The Fever didn't just withstand the intimidation, they weaponized it. By the second quarter, it was clear who looked composed and who looked desperate. The two-time champs were reduced to playground tactics, while the underdog 6 seed played like the seasoned pros. And that contrast was as damning as the scoreboard itself. If the Las Vegas Aces thought intimidation would silence Indiana, then Kelsey Mitchell had other plans. Plans that turned into one of the most electrifying playoff performances the WNBA has seen in years. From the very first jumper, it was obvious she was locked in. But as the Aces escalated their physicality, Mitchell elevated her game to a level Vegas simply couldn't touch. 34 points later, she wasn't just the best player on the floor. She was the unquestioned star of the night. What made it special wasn't just the scoring volume, but the way she did it. Defenders draped over her shoulders, elbows digging into her ribs, double teams thrown her way, and none of it mattered. She slashed through the lane with fearless drives, pulled up for contested threes, and calmly buried mid-range daggers that silenced the Vegas crowd. Every bucket was a direct answer to the Aces' bullying. Every shot a statement that no amount of flopping or refereeing favoritism could deny her. And let's not forget the symbolism. On the very night A'Ja Wilson held up her MVP trophy, Mitchell walked into her house and played like the true most valuable player on the floor. Vegas's defensive rotations crumbled, their best guards were exposed, and their so-called invincibility evaporated under Mitchell's relentless efficiency. When the buzzer sounded, it wasn't Wilson's trophy people were talking about. It was Kelsey Mitchell's masterpiece. This was supposed to be Las Vegas's celebration. Hours before tip-off, A'Ja Wilson hoisted her MVP trophy in front of a roaring home crowd, cementing her as the face of the league. The script was already written. The Aces, back-to-back champions, would flex their dominance, brush off an undermanned Indiana team, and march toward another finals appearance. But that narrative exploded in real time. From the first possession to the final buzzer, the Fever didn't just compete, they dictated. An 89-73 win on the Aces' own floor wasn't just an upset, it was a dismantling of the aura Vegas had built over the last 2 seasons. For weeks, pundits said Indiana was filler, a team lucky to be here, especially with Caitlin Clark and other key names sidelined. But on this night, the Fever flipped that disrespect into fuel. Their ball movement was sharper, their pace relentless, their defense suffocating. Meanwhile, Vegas looked hesitant, second-guessing, almost stunned that an underdog could hit them back this hard. The MVP trophy that was meant to be a crown for Wilson ended up feeling like a weight, dragging the Aces into frustration and sloppy execution. Suddenly, the so-called unbeatable team looked ordinary, while Indiana looked like they belonged all along. And just like that, the Aces' aura of invincibility cracked wide open. If there's one thing that doomed Las Vegas before the ball even tipped, it was arrogance. The Aces didn't just believe they were the better team, they believed Indiana didn't even deserve to share the floor with them. Head coach Becky Hammon said it herself. They haven't seen the real Aces yet. That kind of swagger might play well in sound bites, but it set a tone that backfired spectacularly. Vegas came in expecting to roll, while Indiana came in with nothing to lose. And when you've got nothing to lose, you play free, fearless, and focused. The Aces' overconfidence bled into their body language. Casual closeouts, sloppy rotations, and an assumption that sheer talent would overwhelm the Fever. Instead, Indiana flipped that script. Kelsey Mitchell, Odyssey Sims, and A'Ja Boston didn't look intimidated. They looked insulted. Every possession became a chance to prove the doubters wrong. Every bucket a statement against a team that treated them as background noise. By the time Vegas realized this wasn't a walkthrough, it was too late. Their arrogance had blinded them to the fight in front of them. They didn't just underestimate Indiana's talent, they underestimated their pride. And on this night, pride turned into power, while arrogance turned into ashes. On the very night A'Ja Wilson was crowned the league's MVP, she was completely outclassed by a rookie A'Ja Boston. What unfolded in the paint was not just a defensive battle, it was a masterclass in poise and fundamentals. Wilson, normally dominant, was reduced to a 6 for 22 shooting performance, missing layups, forcing awkward fadeaways, and pleading with referees for calls that never came. Every time she tried to establish position, Boston was there first, planting herself like an immovable wall. When Wilson spun, Boston anticipated. When Wilson elevated, Boston absorbed the contact without flinching. And she wasn't alone. Natasha Howard and Brianna Turner rotated perfectly, turning the paint into a swamp where every touch felt contested. The beauty of Boston's performance was her composure. While Wilson flailed and flopped, Boston stayed calm, disciplined, and relentless. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. One player carried herself like the rightful heir to the league's future. The other looked overwhelmed by the very stage she was supposed to own. For Indiana, it was poetic justice. Hours earlier, Wilson held the MVP trophy high. By night's end, she was humbled on her own home court, unable to crack the defense of a rookie who proved that accolades mean nothing once the ball is tipped. While Kelsey Mitchell stole the headlines with her 34-point explosion, Indiana's upset wasn't a one-woman show, it was a collective masterpiece. Odyssey Sims played like she had been waiting her whole career for this stage. Her drives were fearless, her defense disruptive, but most importantly, she was the calming presence that steadied Indiana when Vegas tried to drag the game into chaos. Natasha Howard and Brianna Turner took on the thankless job of banging in the paint with Wilson in the Aces' front court, holding their ground possession after possession, forcing tough shots without ever losing discipline. And then there was Lexi Hull. She might not have poured in points, but her impact on Jackie Young was undeniable. Hull hounded her all night, turning every cut into a struggle, every jumper into a contested prayer. Her bruises told the story. Vegas tried to bully her, but she never broke, finishing the night with a staggering +24 +. This wasn't a team hoping Mitchell would save them. This was a roster where every player filled their role to perfection. That's what separated the Fever from the Aces. Indiana played connected, empowering one another. Vegas, on the other hand, looked like individuals searching for answers. The difference was as clear as the scoreboard. The Las Vegas Aces didn't just lose on the scoreboard, they unraveled mentally. For a team that prides itself on championship experience, their composure evaporated the moment things didn't go their way. Early missed shots turned into visible frustration. By the third quarter, you could see it in their body language, slumped shoulders, arguments with referees, and even sideline exchanges that betrayed a lack of unity. A'Ja Wilson, the league MVP, flopped repeatedly in hopes of drawing fouls, only to be ignored by officials, which fueled even more frustration. Jackie Young forced contested jumpers. Kelsey Plum played hero ball, and Chelsea Gray's absence left the Aces without a steadying floor general. Meanwhile, Indiana stayed poised. They didn't complain when calls didn't go their way. They just ran back, set their defense, and made the next possession count. The contrast was striking. One team spiraled into desperation, the other rose into discipline. By the fourth quarter, the Aces looked more like a team beaten by their own emotions than by their opponent's talent. And that, perhaps, is the most damning indictment of all. The back-to-back champions weren't just outplayed, they were outclassed in composure. From the opening tip to the final horn, the Fever played with an energy that simply overwhelmed the Aces. It wasn't just about speed, it was about will. Every loose ball seemed to belong to Indiana. Every rebound became a fight they refused to lose. Even when shots rimmed out, they crashed the boards with such ferocity that Vegas had no room to breathe. The pace was relentless. Push in transition, attack mismatches, collapse the defense, kick to shooters. There were no wasted possessions, no moments of hesitation. The Aces, accustomed to dictating tempo, suddenly found themselves gasping, constantly chasing the play instead of controlling it. What stood out most was Indiana's refusal to let up. Even with a double-digit lead, they never slowed down, never gave Vegas a sliver of hope. When the Aces tried to mount mini-runs, the Fever responded instantly with defensive stops or dagger threes as if to say, "Not tonight." That relentless drive exposed something deeper, the hunger of a young team tired of being disrespected. While Vegas played like a team expecting to win, Indiana played like a team willing to bleed for it. And in playoff basketball, hunger always trumps entitlement. This upset isn't just a single-game anomaly, it's a seismic shift in the series and maybe in the league itself. The Indiana Fever walked into the home of the reigning champions on the night their superstar lifted the MVP trophy and dismantled them by 16 points. That's not luck, that's a statement. It proves the Fever aren't just playoff tourists, they're contenders who can outwork, outthink, and outfight even the most decorated roster in the WNBA. For Las Vegas, the pressure is now unbearable. They can no longer lean on the switch will flip narrative, because Indiana has already exposed their cracks, arrogance, lack of composure, and over-reliance on Wilson. If the Aces don't regroup immediately, they risk a humiliating exit that would stain their dynasty talk for years to come. For Indiana, the momentum is electric. They've proven they can win without Caitlin Clark, which makes their ceiling even scarier when she returns. More importantly, they've planted doubt in the minds of Vegas, who now know this won't be a coronation, it's a war. Game 1 wasn't just a win, it was a warning. The Fever are here, they're fearless, and they might just rewrite the WNBA hierarchy sooner than anyone expected.